What is new, Bash Crew? Video by Squiddies. This video went crazy. Apparently, a 16-year-old humiliated a bunch of professional Yu-Gi-Oh players. So imagine you're a professional Yu-Gi-Oh player. You're sweaty. You have a patchy beard, and you've been studying Yu-Gi-Oh for hours. And this 16-year-old comes in and he's a blurred, because everybody hates blurs in these communities. And he comes in and he just beats you. That's gotta fucking suck. Because you best believe these Yu-Gi-Oh players, you best believe they make money off of Yu-Gi-Oh. They make money off these trading card games. You don't know. There's a whole economy of people who just play trading card games and make money off of that. So you best believe they're mad. They're big mad.
I just decided to enter on a whim, basically, and I ended up winning.
This is Marquise Henderson, a 16-year-old boy who has just performed the greatest upset in trading card game history, because he just won a 1,400-man Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship out of nowhere. Even more surprising was the fact that this was the first large Yu-Gi-Oh! Event he had ever attended. A random kid who had never even won a local tournament would somehow embrace the heart of the cards to breeze through the top tables, humiliating pro players along the way, some of whom were so salty that they refused to shake the boy's hand after the match was over. You see, while his opponents used decks that cost thousands of dollars, Marquise instead scrounged together a deck using only cards that he could afford. But he would still somehow assemble a strategy that would completely counter the best decks in the metagame. Yet in the eyes of the elitist Yu-Gi-Oh community, not only was he a nobody, but he was piloting a mediocre, frustrating deck that they thought was terrible. So just how did he manage to conquer all
parents of children who play Roblox?
But yeah, imagine like these guys. Like I remember I saw this one story about a Yu-Gi-Oh dude who was a professional, and he actually cheated. Like it's crazy. He actually cheated, and that was his whole thing. Like he would cheat, get banned from tournaments, go to like a different game, come back to the next one, and he would hop around on different TCGs, and then eventually he ended up passing away. But it just goes to show you, like a lot of these guys, like this is their main bread and butter. So of course they're gonna be big mad that this little 16-year-old black kid is coming in and he thinks he can beat the meta. Like,
odds and win a Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship? Well, allow me to explain. Our story starts in the year 2012, where Marquise is a freshman in high school, playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Casually with his friends during lunch. Though highly popular, Yu-Gi-Oh! is one of the most expensive trading card games. Rare cards were frequently short-printed, creating artificial scarcity, with the staple cards needed for each deck costing hundreds of dollars on the secondary market. Needless to say, it was difficult for anyone to acquire these powerful cards, never mind a boy in high school who had bigger priorities to save for, like hot lunch and Jordans. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! was also one of the most complex games, often with rules that weren't written anywhere in the official rulebook. Because of these reasons, despite the game being marketed towards children, the average tournament would still comprise mainly of adults in their 20s and 30s. So being only 16 years old certainly made things a lot harder. Now, Marquise would learn from his friends that there was a local card store in their area that hosted Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments every Saturday, with a flood of eager duelists occupying every square foot of the store. Though he consistently attended these tournaments for months, he would never win a single one.
I wasn't even really playing, but for like a year and a half, I just kind of started. But yeah, I'd never won locals before. I've been playing just with my friends and stuff like that.
Being a big city, the players in his local scene in Atlanta were much more skilled and had the budget to play the most powerful decks. Yet with each and every tournament, Marquise would slowly improve. After school, he would go online to research the metagame on forums and watch videos to learn the combos.
okay,
Outside
so
of
this wasn't
drumline
just
and
like I mean, I guess he was considered like a nobody, but this wasn't just like he just started one day and was like, I'm gonna enter a tournament. But he very well had less means, right? It's like, it's coming from less means, coming from worse cards. He had all these odds against him. He didn't have the meta because, best believe everybody's playing the fucking meta, right? If you ever play a competitive game, everyone's playing the same gun, the same cards, the same whatever it is. So he came from less means. And probably had less time on his side too. So it goes
basketball. Yu-Gi-Oh! Had quickly become his favorite hobby. While his skills were no doubt improving, being a high school student, he still didn't have access to the game's strongest cards. Popular decks at the time included the Dino Rabbit strategy, which leveraged the cuddly rescue rabbit to summon out two normal dinosaurs that could be combined into the Evolzerlagia and Dolka to negate card and monster effects. It would go toe-to-toe with the wind-ups, a combo deck that could set up an army of toys and rip away the opponent's hand on the first turn with a loop that involved recycling the wind-up hunter over and over again. But they made these decks really hard to put together. Their signature cards were printed in the highest rarity, Secret Rare, which meant you would be lucky to even pull one out of a box of 36 booster packs. To give you an example, Rescue Rabbit and Evolve Zordoka were both—
they've absolutely destroyed the Yu-Gi-Oh market. Nobody wants Yu-Gi-Oh cards anymore. They're absolutely not no one wants them. Obviously, these freaking, these guys who play Yu-Gi-Oh, they like them, but now nobody really even, there's not like a secondary market for it. You can get any card very easily. They're not very expensive, so
$80 each, and cards like Wind Up Zen mains were $150. And most of the time, you could play up to 3 copies of a given card, so if you multiply that, it was pretty ridiculous even by modern day standards. But it gets worse, because there were 2 cards that were so powerful, every single deck would have to play them. Tour Guide from the Underworld was a generic monster that summoned Sangan from the deck, who could then search for all of the other deck's signature monsters when he was sent to the graveyard. But it also spawned 2 bodies for an instant XC summon, like Levier the Sea Dragon to revive Rescue Rabbit, or Wind Up Zen Mighty to summon out any Wind Up. And 3 copies of Tour Guide cost $450.
it just means that it's a whole bunch of strategy behind it.
Because of its secret rarity, and of course, the waifu tax. Then there was Max C, a shiny bug that let the user draw a card for every summon the opponent conducted on a given turn. A mandatory counter to heavy combo decks like the windups, and one of the only ways to circumvent the turn 1 hand loop when going second.
And here comes the infamous loop, folks.
It's ironically still one of the most powerful cards in modern day, which justifies its $100 price tag at the time. In total, this meant that you would have to spend well over $1,000 to build a solid Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Without these staple cards, you were basically put at a significant disadvantage, a barrier that many players would struggle with at the time, and honestly that kind of continues to this day. Marquise would obviously feel a little discouraged, knowing that this was an issue that he and his friends had faced. But one day in their group chat, one of—
like, it's weird, right? Obviously, we were just knowing this kid, but it reminds me of, like, I mean, obviously the story of a lot of black kids, right? Like Michael Jordan, right? I'm not saying this dude is Michael Jordan at all, but like Michael Jordan, he was playing in beat up shoes, playing with I think he said he was playing with a makeshift basketball hoop. Like, it wasn't even a real basketball hoop. So it's like kids do stuff like that, or like you even see like people, other like little young black kids in like Africa, for example. They'll create their own gyms and stuff like that. So it reminds me of that. Like, it's just kind of, it's interesting what you can do when you don't have means. But yeah, I mean, we started—
Marquise's friends excitedly shared an idea. A deck that had somehow won the national championship the year prior out of nowhere. It was a TG stun deck.
My friend showed me, he's like, oh, like this deck is cheap, you can play this deck. I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot.
A strategy that leveraged using trap cards to stun the opponent out from playing, like Skill Drain, which, as the name would imply, negated all monster effects on the field.
Skill Drain stops everything. And in my head, I was like, I didn't know too much. I was like reading all the cards. I'm like, is this not the best card in the game?
Now, the whole concept of the TG deck was to stun out the opponent using the trap cards, while the Tech Genis monsters would replace themselves when they were destroyed in combat, creating a cycle of near infinite resources while whittling down the opponents using the traps. And since these effects activated in the graveyard, they were unaffected by Skill Drain, which only negated monster effects on the field.
This deck is like great. Like, this is the one I just win the most with. I just played so much with it. Played it for like 5 or 6 months, just that one deck.
Marquise quickly jumped onto the idea. The cards were relatively cheap for the most part and easily accessible. The only problem with this deck was that its competitiveness was rather short-lived. By this time, it had since been outclassed by newer cards and excessive power creep that was difficult for trap-based decks to keep up with, especially when going second. So the deck had been dropped by the rest of the player base. But Marquise would continue playing TGs. It became his signature deck, and he strove to make it even better, making tweaks to it day by day. This would continue for the next few months, and as time passed, Marquise would eventually participate
New medal posters for those who come after.
Tournaments. These were events on a larger scale that would attract stronger opponents, often a few hundred, who would travel from other cities in hopes of placing in the top percentile to receive an invite to the national championship held at the end of the year. His best finish at these regionals would be a 7-3 final record, a career highlight. An impressive feat on paper, but not exactly notable in the competitive Yu-Gi-Oh scene, for you would typically need a 9-1 record to place in the top 8 and receive prizing. So naturally, no one in the competitive scene would know the name Marquise Henderson, never mind even in his own local area. But just a few months later, 'Later, 'this would change completely. 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 'Later, It was soon announced that Atlanta would be the host city for the next Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series, the most competitive tournament at the highest peak of the game that would draw over 1,000 duelists, including notable pro players who dominated the tournament circuit. Now, Marquise was rather unfamiliar with championship-level tournaments. His familiarity with competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Was limited mostly to his area, with regional tournaments being the extent of what he had experienced. So when his friends told him about YCS Atlanta, he figured it'd be the size of regionals with 100 players or two at most. But he had no idea that this would be something far greater than.
I didn't expect that it was gonna be that big of a stadium. Jesus Christ! Let me move my head real quick so y'all can see. Golly, that is a lot of people.
You would have ever imagined.
My friend just told me about this event. Like, I didn't know what it was going to be. I thought it was like 50, 100 people. My dad, the first day I went to the event, YCS, he's like chilling in the freaking convention center. He's like, oh yeah, we can go to the convention center. I'll go with you.
On the Friday of the tournament, his dad would drive him to the venue to pick up their entry badges. And only upon entering would he be shocked by the sheer scale of the event. Instead of a few hundred players, there was well over 1,000.
There was like a million people running around. I'm like, I don't even want to enter. He's like, you have to enter. We're already here. I'm like, okay, I'll enter.
A robust hall filled with the most competitive, daring challengers, many of whom had ventured from the opposite side of the country to test their skills. You see, the winners of this tournament in particular would receive the coveted Blood Mephist prize card, that to this day sells for thousands of dollars. Unlike the other prize cards, and for reasons unknown, the Blood Mephist has never been reprinted. Rumors say it's due to legal reasons with the card's original artist, meaning that the only copies of the card in existence to this very day were the limited copies given out to the winners of these tournaments, making it now one of the rarest cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. So naturally, there was a big prize at stake. But before the tournament had even begun,
Easy is it to liquidate Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards? Because, like, alright, for me, for example, I collect Pokemon cards, and even in and of itself, like, it's not that hard to sell Pokemon cards, but Pokemon cards are pretty hyped, and it's kind of hard to sell it. Like, I remember I was selling my cards and it took me about a week, which is pretty good, right, to like sell some cards. How easy is it to liquidate a Yu-Gi-Oh card? Then again, a $20,000 Yu-Gi-Oh card. Like, how many people are actually in the market to buy something like that? I mean, a true collector, I suppose, but...
these players had already activated their strongest card, the credit card. The vendors were completely overwhelmed, with players swiping left and right, forced to pay premiums on last-minute cards that they needed for competition the very next day. Most of them were using Dino Rabbit or Windups, with a few other decks in between that were equally as pricey. Luckily for Marquise, the expensive cards in his TG deck, like Pot of Duality and Solemn Warning, had already been reprinted the year prior, costing only a few dollars instead of hundreds. But nevertheless, he still wanted to make important additions to his deck where possible. With only $40 left to his name, Max C was out of the equation, certainly putting him at a disadvantage, especially when going second, and he would perhaps be the only player in the entire hall that was not playing the card. But at the same time, he had a feeling inside that for his trap-heavy deck, he wouldn't need it. And you know, saving $300 didn't seem like a bad idea either. Instead, Marquise walked up to the vendors and decided to finally splurge on a lone copy of Bryanak Dragon of the Ice Barrier. A card that wasn't necessary for the deck at all, but could be made in niche scenarios with a TG Striker, and was another step to optimizing his deck into the strongest it could possibly be for the tournament the next day.
I spent my last $40 on the Bryonak that I needed for my deck. I summoned it once, but it won me the game, so it was freaking worth it.
Lastly, in place of the Max C, he opted instead to run 2 copies of the Beast King Barbaros, a card that had never seen play before. Though printed as a level 8 with an attack value of 3,000, Beast King had an effect that would allow its user to drop its attack to 1,900 and normal summon it without tributing any monsters. But while Skill Drain was on the field, it would negate this drawback completely and restore its attack back to 3,000, threatening even the Blue Eyes White Dragon. His deck would maximize the full capacity of Skill Drain, a card whose potential he recognized early on. Thunder King Ryle would stun the opponent from searching their deck for cards, while Horn of the Phantom Beast boosted his beast monsters and let him draw a card each time the monster trampled over an opposing one by battle. And last but not least, Reborn Tengu was a pesky beast warrior who could be powered up by the Horn and also replace itself when it was removed from the field. In total, his deck would cost just over $100, and most of the players in the Hall would scoff at the idea of this deck being remotely competitive, until day one of the tournament kicked off, which would start off extremely well for Marquise Henderson, who jump-started his event with 6 wins and 0 losses, with his friends shocked beyond belief. Marquise was completely locked in.
I ended up going 6-0, and that's when I was like, what the heck? So
he would only drop his first match in round 7 to an empty jar deck, another rogue strategy that relied on decking out the opponent by looping the morphing jar over and over again.
And then I lost round 7 to a very insane opponent. I'm sitting here reading, is this work? It's yeah, this works. So this freaking empty jar guy, I even flipped skill drain on him, and he's literally still killing me through skill drain, flip up and then I'll chain book a moon. Okay, now it's face down, I'll dump your hand again. I was like, what? What are you talking about?
But outside of this, all of his other opponents had utilized powerful meta decks, and some of these opponents became perturbed, for Marquise would have to read a lot of their cards, which agitated them even further because this dude was going around playing a frustrating rogue deck, but also reading the popular cards that they would have expected him to know with a 6-0 record at a major tournament like this. And both his opponents and the judges were especially shocked to find that Marquise wasn't familiar with the combos and rulings that they thought were basic.
When I say I wasn't really into the game, I hadn't played for that long, the judge had to explain me for a minute or two about the rulings of wind-up shark and wind-up magician. So I'm like, how does that work? And I'm like, I don't know, whatever. I had to read a lot of the cards. Yeah, it was just a lot. I didn't know dueling was that much.
It also
Did you know 90% of all
that he was flipping cards like skill drain that nullified their expensive cards?
Some people didn't like the deck because obviously you just stun your opponent, stuff like that. Yeah, it is what it is. Obviously I drew the right traps very often, drew skill drain a lot.
These players were completely shocked, and word of mouth spread pretty quickly. Online chatter slowly begun, with rumors of an unknown duelist who was playing in his first ever YCS with a budget version of an outdated deck idea that pissed off the pro players at the top tables. While many reveled in the chaos and cheered Marquise on, others were less than optimistic. Some of the pro players at the event even refused to shake his hand after the match, as they were extremely salty about the prospect of losing to such a player, and a deck that locked them down from...
you see this young blurred, he's outclassing you, you're like, why would I shake this man's hand? Fuck that shit. He's a fucking professional at Yu-Gi-Oh! He's probably spent thousands of dollars on his deck. He's like, why the fuck it? Fuck you, shake your hand, nigga. And he's not saying that, but he's like, nigga, fuck you, shake your hand, nigga.
Never mind one that was full of cheap, low-rarity cards.
I don't know if he appreciated, I just kept drawing skill drain. I kept drawing freaking skill drain, and he actually MST'd when I flipped another one in response. So I just have freaking 2 skill drains. He killed when I just have another one. So he was mad about that.
Marquise would play against several opponents utilizing the Dino Rabbit deck, a matchup that he found to be favorable midway throughout the tournament. He would set as many trap cards as possible, and then use skill drain to lock out their signature Evolzar monsters.
What I was most afraid of was the Dino Rabbit deck, because they can just it's a free negate. I'm like, oh well, you can't even get around that. There's nothing you can do. I didn't even know what Dino Rabbit did at the time. I was scared of it. Some of the matches were just brain dead easy. It wasn't even me. It was just a good meta choice.
And at this point, you're probably wondering how he did so well. I mean, it's his first major tournament. He's picking up cards to read them. His opponents are frustrated. What was the secret sauce that Marquise had implemented? Well, for starters, none of his opponents were really prepared, and many of their decks would lack adequate trap removal or ways to counter skill drain. You see, a lot of these players weren't even playing Mystical Space Typhoon, which was a classic way to destroy a spell and trap card. In its place, they instead elected to play high-impact hand disruption cards that could be used on the first turn to try and stop the opponent from comboing, like Effect Veiler to negate the wind-up combo. And ironically, these cards happen to be absolutely useless against Marquise's TG stun deck, which neither summoned a lot of monsters nor utilized their effects.
Because no one really cares about the trap decks back then. At least in that specific event, a lot of people just didn't even play MST. And I don't think some of them cited it. It was kind of smooth sailing if you just get that up and it was you can stun your opponent, because a lot of people didn't see it coming.
Since no one was prepared for it, this meant that skill drain was there to stay on Marquise's field, allowing him to ultimately finish with an impressive 9-2 final record.
I called my dad, I was like, oh yeah, you're just going to play in the tournament, have fun, whatever. And I called him after round 9, I was like, oh, I think I have to come back. I think I have to come back to this. And he's like, why? I'm like, well, there's a day 2. And I guess I made the day 2. He's like, okay, we'll come back.
Also, if you guys are enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and touch that 32 players would face off in a sudden death playoff bracket to ultimately decide the winner of the tournament. And in 12th place was none other than Marquise Henderson. His friends erupted in cheers. Marquise had done the impossible. He had made the top cut of a tournament with almost 1,400 players and defeated multiple pro players along the way with his own unique strategy. But his job wasn't done yet. He still had more Yu-Gi-Oh! To play. His top 32 and top 16 matches would be against Alistair Albanes and Michael Lux, two pro players with dozens of prior accolades, the former with a second place championship finish and the latter a first place champion. Both players were using Dino Rabbit, which skill drain and a plethora of traps would take care of.
I was in the top cut,
damn.
and you know they like rope off the freaking place for you for like the duelist to play. Had me, and I'm like looking at the concession. So when I won, like, oh, can I go over there? And he's like, no, you can't go any. You got to freaking stay here and do. I'm like, oh, this is freaking serious. Like, what the heck? I can't believe they're like keeping tabs on you. I was like, okay.
On an empty stomach, top 8 would be an uphill battle, for his opponent, John Oxendine, would utilize a wind-up strategy that could spell doom for Marquise if he went second. Like I mentioned earlier, the deck had a signature turn 1 combo that could discard nearly every single card in Marquise's hand before he even had a turn to play, especially because his deck lacked the one defensive card that could refill his hand to prevent this, Max C. But luckily for Marquise, he would win the die roll and go first, setting up skill drain, which was more than enough to stop the windups from, well, winding up.
I did like go second against a lot of wind. They just didn't have hand. Again, I just lucky. I don't know what the statistics of that are.
Narrowly avoiding disaster thanks to a little bit of luck with the dice roll, the semi-final match would once again test his fortune. It was another wind-up opponent, a pro player by the name of Anthony Pasquarello. Now, Anthony's deck actually played 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, and though Marquise would open the dice roll once again with a set skill drain, Anthony would open with both copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, but the rest of his hand didn't contain any monsters, allowing Marquise to simply beat him down. Even more interesting was the fact that Anthony had anticipated the existence of rogue trap decks, and to account for this even further, he would also side deck copies of Royal Decree, a continuous trap card that negated the effects of all other trap cards. And in the second game, he would open with a copy of Royal Decree and Mystical Space Typhoon, the perfect cards to counter Marquise's strategy. But just like in the first game, the rest of his hand was rather weak, with a lone wind-up rabbit as his only line of offense, which wasn't the card he needed to initiate the wind-up hand loop combo. And not only this, but Marquise would top deck his own copy of Mystical Space Typhoon to destroy the Royal Decree, allowing him to set up his army of trap cards and ultimately win the match. Marquise's Guardian Angel was evidently working overtime. Ironically, Hanse Aguero, the winner of Nationals a year prior and the pioneer of the TG Stun deck, yes, the very man who Marquise got his idea from in the first place, would also make the top cut with Dino Rabbit. But he would be knocked out early by another player, so the two wouldn't cross paths. But he would give Marquise a few motivational words for what would be the most important match in his entire life, the finals. His opponent would be the last remaining Dino Rabbit player in the tournament, and the stakes were higher than ever.
The guy in the finals, his name was Roman Rodriguez. I still freaking remember him. Great opponent. It was a great duel. He actually said in the middle, he's like, don't take my picture. And the staff was like, well, we need a picture. He's like, no, I don't do picture. So like, you won't find a picture of him anywhere. So had he come in first, you actually wouldn't have a picture of the winner at all.
Miraculously, Marquise would go first yet again and set up the deck's most optimal opening play, a Beast King Barbaros backed behind 4 powerful trap cards, with, you guessed it, one of them being skill drain. But the icing on top was a Starlight Road that would protect his field from being wiped away by Roman's Heavy Storm. In the second game, with his back against the wall staring down his worst nightmare in the form of 2 Ovalsarlagias, he would somehow top deck a Pot of Duality, revealing the top 3 cards of his deck to add one to his hand.
I used 2 traps, made 2 negates, but I'm still like dying. Did duality and I got Dark Hole. I freaking cleared it. So like it was like the double Lagia, like the thing I was most afraid of. I ended up like somehow getting out of that. It was so lucky.
With the last revealed card miraculously being the Dark Hole that he needed to wipe away his opponent's entire board. This was a game-winning move that would raise a trophy and the Blood Mephist into the air by the newly crowned champion of YCS Atlanta, Marquise Henderson.
Hey Meta, play gorgeous.
I ain't that's enough said, but young black kid, he got them folks mad, man. It's crazy what you can do with low means. Make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and join the Bash crew. I love you, and I'll see your family. Shout out, Deuce.